when your phone buzzes in the dead of night, you expect nothing more than another random notification, a delivery update, a meme, a wrong number. You don't expect a message that shatters the world you built in your head. You don't expect 3 simple words to erase 3 years of plans, of inside jokes, of promises whispered in the dark. But at 1:42 a.m., her name lit up my screen and the message read, "I'm pregnant, but it's not yours." I remember the exact way the light fell across my couch, the way the room felt too big and too small at the same time. I remember my chest going hollow, as if someone had reached inside and loosened the part of me that had belonged to us. There wasn't anger at first. There wasn't any of the explosive drama you see in movies. There was a strange, quiet, as if the world had paused to let that sentence finish echoing. I stared at the screen, read it again, hoping I'd misread a word, that some autocorrect had betrayed her, but the words were there, clean and casual, like she was telling me she'd be late for dinner. The betrayal didn't come with fireworks. It came with the coldness of normalcy, and that was worse. You think in that moment you'll react, you'll type a dozen messages, call, demand explanations, accuse, beg, make some grand scene. I thought about all those things, too. I moved my thumb over the keyboard and deleted replies until the letters blurred. I could feel the urge to control the narrative, to pull every thread and expose the whole thing, but something slowed me down. Maybe it was the realization that anything I wrote at that moment would be written from a place of rawness and pain, not clarity. Maybe it was the recognition that my responses had been farmed by months of excuses, late apologies, and half-truths, and that finally, in that pure, brutal sentence, the truth had no need to be dramatic. She had given me the truth in the simplest form, and sometimes the simplest truths cut the deepest. So I typed one word, okay, not why, not who, not I want to talk, just okay. That single word felt like a stone dropped into a pond, small, silent, and then ripples. Okay wasn't an acceptance of the betrayal or a surrender. It was a surrender of the fight that had become our relationship. It contained everything I refused to say aloud, the exhaustion of defending her to friends, the nights I lay awake convincing myself that her distance was temporary, the times I ignored the little betrayals because I loved her enough to believe in the next apology. Okay was not an eraser. It was a clean line drawn under everything that had come before it. It was the moment I stopped trying to salvage something that had already been dismantled. After I hit send, my hands shook. The apartment felt different, like someone had rearranged the furniture of my life while I slept. My mind ran back through the months, the cancelled plans, the missed calls, the late-night texts that went unanswered. I remembered friends' offhand comments I dismissed as jealousy, the times I'd pressured myself to be more patient, more understanding, because she said she needed space. I thought about the future we'd whispered into existence, travel plans, the 2-bedroom apartment we'd laugh about, the names we joked we'd give our kids someday. All of it felt like paper boats in a river, pretty and fragile, floating away. In those first hours, grief arrived like a visitor who refuses to leave. It wasn't loud. It was a slow, relentless ache that settled into the hollow where hope used to live. I let it come. I let myself feel small and foolish for trusting so much without seeing clearly. She called. Once, twice, at least a dozen times, the screen lighting up with her name like a spotlight on a stage where I didn't want to be. Each ring felt like the echo of a life I no longer recognized. I let it go to voicemail. Let her leave the scratchy fragments of apologies she thought might sew things back together. "I'm sorry," she said in that voice that always sounded 2 steps away from sincerity. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Her voice trembled. So did mine hearing it through the static. I listened to each message as if cataloging evidence, the timestamps, the odd pauses, the parts where she tried to sound sorry but slipped into explanation. I didn't call back. I didn't want to give her the chance to rehearse a confession into something that would soothe her conscience but not mine. I wasn't interested in comforting her guilt. I was interested in protecting what was left of myself. That week was a blur of small, domestic acts that felt like ritual cleansing. I boxed up her things with a detachment I would have thought impossible a month earlier. Her hoodie, its sleeves frayed from the way she'd tuck her hands inside them, the chipped mug she used every morning, a faded photo of the 2 of us on a rainy day, laughing despite the weather. I put them in a moving box, taped it shut, and left it at her door with no note. I imagined a scene of confrontation, of raised voices and slammed doors, but the act of leaving that box felt more final than any argument. It was a choice to let the past find its own way out of my life without me trying to force a dramatic exit. The silence that followed felt like a broom sweeping clean the dust of all the things we pretended didn't matter. Anger came later, as it often does, in cold flashes. I'd catch myself thinking about what the other man might have said when she told him, whether he had promised something to her or whether she'd told him the same lie she'd told me, that everything would be different this time. I imagined conversations that never happened and scenes of betrayal that filled in the blanks with fire. But anger, while loud, didn't last. It was a fuel that burned out quickly and left me with ash and the slow, steadier work of rebuilding. The real work was quieter, undoing the narrative I'd told myself about who I was with her. I had prided myself on being patient, on being the one who could hold space in a world that demanded instant gratification. But I had let patience become an excuse, an acceptance of being put second, of being a plan B wearing the mask of unwavering devotion. Days bled into weeks. She sent messages that swung like a pendulum from regretful to entitled, apologies that read like scripts, pleas that tried to fold me back into a story where we forgave and forgot. The messages asked for second chances and promised to be better. They told me the pregnancy was a mistake, a surprise, something that terrified her as much as it did me. They tried to elicit my sympathy, to remind me of the versions of herself I had loved, the woman before the distance, before the secrets. I read each one and felt the old compulsion to answer, to rescue, to salvage what could still be saved. But that compulsion had been my weakness. Answering would have been the beginning of another slow erosion. So I took what felt like the cruel but necessary step. I blocked her number. It was not a vengeful act. It was self-preservation. It was the equivalent of putting a hand over a wound so it could stop being irritated every time someone walked past. In the emptiness that followed, I began to notice things about myself that had been muffled by the static of relationship noise. I began to reclaim small pleasures that weren't curated to impress her. I took long walks without wondering whether she'd want to come. I cooked meals that I actually wanted to eat. I rediscovered music I'd loved before I ever met her and read books my brain had been too tired to finish. There was a tenderness in that rediscovery, as if I'd been dusting off parts of myself for years and only now was brave enough to see them gleam. Friends came around in unexpected ways, not with the performative outrage you see in films but with steady presence, a text at odd hours, an offer to get coffee, a willingness to sit in silence. Their ordinary, human kindness did more to heal me than any grand gesture ever could. People ask whether I wanted closure. Sometimes I thought I did. Like a person who believes the last word could stitch a hole in a tapestry, I imagined confrontation scenes where truth would be forced into confession and then into repentance, where apologies would rain down like confetti and everything would be wrapped up neatly. But life rarely offers cinematic closure. The reality was messy and, strangely, more liberating. The closure I needed was not from her, it was from myself. It was the acceptance that what she revealed did not define my worth or my future. It was the permission to grieve without performing, to let the sadness come and then decide it had served its purpose. Closure arrived in small, practical ways. The day I laughed at a stupid joke and didn't feel guilty about it. The night I slept through without waking in the dark waiting for a text. The morning I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch at the person staring back. Months later, the memory still stung, but it no longer consumed me. The sentence that once felt like a verdict became a lesson carved into my bones. I learned how to recognize the difference between patience that heals and patience that erodes. I learned to listen to the soft alarms in my chest instead of dismissing them as paranoia. I learned that love requires honesty and respect, not excuses and evasions. And most importantly, I learned to value my own peace over the toxic comfort of holding on to what wasn't meant to be. People told me I was lucky to have escaped before a child was born, as if that had been some narrow miss of fate. The truth is, luck had nothing to do with it. It was the culmination of quiet decisions, the choice to step away, the refusal to be gaslit into staying, the brave small acts of self-care that rebuild a life brick by brick. There are nights when I still wonder about the what-ifs, those dangerous, seductive fantasies that try to rewrite history. What if I had noticed sooner? What if I had said something different that day? What if I had fought harder? But those questions rarely help. They are like weeds that take root in the fertile soil of regret. I pull them out when they appear and remind myself of the facts, the message, the timing, the casualness of the confession. That one word, okay, was not flippant. It was final. It was the boundary I had been too afraid to set for myself before. Saying okay was an act of ownership. It acknowledged the truth, drew a line, and freed me to build everything on the other side. If there is a mercy in the story, it's this: endings make room. They clear space where something real and unhurried can grow. In the aftermath, I met people who were honest without being theatrical, who loved without measuring, and who talked about the future in a way that included me rather than tolerated me. I re-entered the world not as someone patched up by another's apology but as someone rewritten by resilience. That is not to say it was easy. The ache of betrayal softened but left a scar, a quiet reminder to trust cautiously and to value myself fiercely. It taught me that self-respect is the most radical thing you can offer yourself when someone else tries to make you an afterthought. So, if you ever find your phone lighting up with news you never thought you'd receive, if someone you love drops a sentence that unravels everything, know that you have choices. You can script a soap opera and let pain become performance. Or you can opt for something quieter, a single word that draws a boundary, a period that ends a sentence, and the courage to walk forward. My one word wasn't dramatic, and it didn't resolve the messy aftermath, but it did what I needed it to do. It stopped me from hemorrhaging my dignity in the name of love. It marked the moment I reclaimed myself. And now, years from that night, when the memory surfaces it no longer hollows me out. It reminds me of a turning point, a fractured hour that led to a better life. It reminds me that endings are sometimes the hardest and bravest choices we make for ourselves. So if you hear this story and recognize the tremor of your own past in it, take this as my quiet, stubborn testimony. You don't need another person's apology to become whole. You need the courage to say, okay, to mean it, and then to live like you mean it.